Oh, and we are live. Okay. This is working now. We are live. I'm very sorry about that delay, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Owen Rice. I'm the Competitions Vice President for the Murdoch Student Law Society. I'm very sorry for the delay in this broadcast. We had some minor technical difficulties, but we're now up and running. Tonight's competition is between Sean Roberts for the prosecution and Michael Malonis for the defence. They've both fought very hard over the past 4 rounds to go this far in our junior witness examination competition, proudly sponsored by Allens. Tonight, representing Allens are Mr. Hanman Chan and Ms. Ebony Back. I'd like to thank them both for offering up their time and their services tonight to judge the competition and provide their expertise to our competitors. I'd also like to thank Alex Crowhurst and Talia Briggs for offering to witness tonight. Thank you very much. It's an essential service. I know you guys don't get much recognition, but it's great to have you here. I'd also like to thank the remainder of the MSLS committee and just the MSLS in general. Thank you guys for listening in tonight, no matter where you may be. And especially my 2 officers, Ryan Garvey and Stephen Teeley. You guys have both been essential over the past few weeks, getting us organised, getting us online. So if it's all right with everyone, I'd like to start the competition as quickly as we can. Hanwan and Ebony, sorry. Do you have any questions?
No, just to confirm that we'll be keeping track of the time.
You'll be keeping track of the time, and competitors, You're also authorised to keep track of your own time using your phones or whatever you need.
Just one clarification. Last week I got conflicting information. Is the time paused during objections?
Time is not paused during objections.
All right, that's what I heard last week as well, but in the rules you put out, it does say that the time is paused.
Is that the competition rules or the regulations?
That is the junior witness examination competition rules.
Okay.
I can cite you the clause if you'd like.
I'm very sorry. That's a mistake. I'm sorry. I'll be fixing that immediately. Time is not paused in accordance with national rules. Time is not paused for objections. All right. I'll leave you guys to it. Let me know if you have any problems.
Okay, great. Well, I just want to check that we're clear on the times that everybody has.
Yep, so it's 2 minutes for opening.
Yep.
And then once again, I got conflicting information because the sheet on the rules with the extra time in the final, I think it's 15 and 25 minutes for shoot and cross, but that's not what I got told last week as well. So once again, I'm not 100% clear on those, but opening and closing are 2 minutes and 3 minutes. I don't know.
Okay, so are the competitors clear on the time being 2 minutes for opening, 15 minutes for chief, 25 for cross, and 3 minutes for closing?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, great. Does my co-judge have anything to say here, Hanman? You okay?
No, so we're definitely going by the grand final times?
Yes.
Or just standard? Yeah, okay, fantastic.
Okay. Okay, well, if we're ready to start, then we can hear the opening from the prosecution.
Sorry, are we doing appearances first?
Oh, right, yes, I will take appearances. Thank you.
Good evening, Your Honour. My name is Roberts and I appear for the State of Western Australia in the matter of R and Oliver Black. The State has charged Mr Black with the attempt to unlawfully kill under Section 283 of the Criminal Code. Would Your Honour like a copy of the legislation?
We have a copy, thank you.
Michael Malonis, appearing for the defence.
Thank you, Mr Malonis. Okay, and we'll proceed with the opening. Thank you.
Your Honour, the State submits that on March 15th, 2020, Oliver Black intentionally stabbed Mr John Snow in a deliberate attempt to unlawfully kill him. The prosecution submits that Mr. Black had no lawful reason or excuse to attempt to kill Mr. Snow. In section 283 of the Criminal Code, it defines attempt to unlawfully kill as doing an act which is likely to endanger human life with the intention of killing. The state submits that the accused has met all of these criteria without lawful excuse beyond a reasonable doubt. On March 15th, Mr. Black, while working under Mr. Snow's supervision, engaged in a dispute pertaining to the performance of Mr. Black's workplace duties. Mr. Black, by his own account, expressed concern about the risk of financial insecurity that may arise from losing his job as the result of performing these duties in the manner that Mr. Snow had asked him. Mr. Snow, referring to Mr. Black's ongoing hostility and insubordinate nature, expressed the intent to terminate the accused's employment at their shared workplace. An altercation ensued as a result, with Mr. Black at some point losing balance and knocking a glass over. Mr. Black then stabbed Mr. Snow in the chest with a fragment of the glass in a set of circumstances disputed by the two parties deferring accounts. Mr. Black then fled the scene and failed to alert police to the incident. The prosecution submits that no set of circumstances described neither by the complainant nor the accused give rise to a lawful excuse to kill or attempt to kill. By all accounts, the accused's relationship with the complainant has been tense for some time. The accused has also experienced financial duress resulting from a period of joblessness. A combination of these two motivators provoked the intentional stabbing of Mr. Snow by Mr. Black. Thank you, Your Honour.
We're not doing opening, we're doing opening witness, just in this competition format.
Yep, so we'll proceed with the prosecution's examination in chief.
If it pleases Your Honour, the prosecution would like to call Mr. John Snow. Mr. Snow, please state your name and occupation for the court.
My name's Jonathan Snow, of 4 Winterville Drive, Perth. I'm 22 years old and I work as the head security guard at the Wall nightclub in Joondalup.
What can your work consist of?
So, as head of security, for the most part, I enjoy my work, but sometimes we do have people come in trying to cause trouble. We do have people looking for a fight. I generally try to talk them out of it before anything else happens.
Is that how you approach your work in general?
Yes.
Can you tell us where
I try and be as able.
Can you tell us where you were on the 15th of... Can you tell us where you were on the 15th of March, Mr. Snow?
Oh, I was working my usual shift, open at 8 p.m. to close at 2 a.m. At the Wall. We were having our end of summer winter is coming party.
And do you remember much happening that night around 11 p.m?
After I spent the first few hours of the shift outside checking IDs, around 11 p.m, however, I head back inside after I got into a disagreement with another guard, Oliver Black.
And can you tell us about Oliver Black?
Oliver Black, one of the newer guards at the Wall, he and I haven't gotten along since he falsely accused me of stealing his watch around the time he started the job.
Did he explain at all why he thought that you had stolen his watch?
I can't recall. I don't know why he thought I stole his watch.
So how is he? Is he receptive to your leadership?
He's always critical of my decisions as a head security guard. Recently, though, he's been getting ruder and more aggressive.
And does that... How is your relationship with him in general?
Well, on the night of winter is coming, he directly disobeyed my orders, playing a good customer.
Sorry, Mr. Snow, we'll get to that. How's your relationship been with Mr. Black?
We don't really get along, but he, as I said, he's getting more. Since he thought I stole his watch, he's been getting more rude and more aggressive.
And can you tell us about Mr. Black's conduct at the Winter is Coming party then?
Yep, so as I briefly mentioned, on the night of the winter is coming, he directly disobeyed my orders to let in a good customer and instead refused them entry. I believe it was about 11:05 when that happened.
And how did you handle that infraction?
Well, I asked Mr. Black to come inside so we wouldn't be seen arguing with the guards and our patrons in line to get in.
So in that sense, do you recall the exchange at all?
So when we were inside, I calmly asked him, "What's your problem?" To which he angrily responded with the words to the effect of, "You're my problem and you're a useless head of security. You'll just let anyone in."
And so how did his emotional state come across?
Well, I was offended by the accusation. I take my job seriously.
Sorry, Mr. Snow. Sorry, Mr. Snow. We'll get to that. How did his emotional state come across to you in terms of his emotional state in the exchange?
He was really angry that I would pull him aside.
So how do you take Mr. Black's comments, Mr. Snow?
Well, I was offended by the accusation. I take my job seriously, and I like to think I do my job well.
What did you say to his accusations?
Well, I said, "Ollie, you're completely out of line." And I said, "I don't think this is going to work out."
And what did you do then, Mr. Snow?
I then put a hand on his shoulder and I started to walk him outside the club.
And why were you walking him outside of the club exactly?
Well, I said this because I was planning to fire him. I can't have people I can't rely on working for me.
And how did he respond to being fired?
As soon as I touched him, he flipped out. He yelled, "No, you're out of line, John. I'll never take orders from you." He then spat in my face and started flailing around.
What happened after that?
Well, everything after happened really quickly. Oliver must have slipped or something because the next thing I know, he was on the ground.
Objection, Your Honour. Opinion. Clearly the witness doesn't know. They said slipped or something.
Counsel for the prosecution, do you have any response to that?
This is part of the prosecution witness's account of the events. He can't say for certain 100%, and that's acceptable, but it is his understanding that he slipped.
If he can't say for certain, he's speculating.
Is there not an acceptable margin for error in those comments?
Yeah, sorry. My question to counsel is it still opinion evidence given based off the statement which has been the witness's statement? It's necessary to the facts in issue here about whether he fell or slipped.
It is definitely an issue, Your Honour, but the fact of the matter is that the witness is speculating. I mean, the witness says in his statement, must have slipped or something, so it clearly seems to me that it's a guess.
Yeah, sorry. Does the prosecution have a comment to make on that?
Yes, Your Honour. A lot of things can be expected to happen in an altercation like this, and it's unfair to expect that a witness might keep track of absolutely everything with 100% certainty. So that or something is fair in covering the witness's possible doubt about whether he slipped or something else had happened that affected the accused's balance.
Okay. Sorry, I might just consult my co-judge on how we would like to proceed here. Okay, sorry. I think we'll proceed on the grounds that it's recollection of the witness and they're not currently departing from their witness statement. So I think we'll proceed.
Thank you, Your Honour. So, just to recap, Mr. Snow, do you remember what happened after he started flailing around?
So, as I said, everything happened really quickly. He must have slipped because 1 minute he was up, the next minute he was down on the ground. And I heard a glass smash. And then Oliver yelled something and lunged off the ground towards me.
Do you remember what happened after he lunged at you?
Well, next thing I knew was that I felt a blinding pain in my chest and fell over. I touched my chest and realised that something was bleeding heavily out of a deep gash. I realised that Oliver must have stabbed me with something, and then I passed out from the pain.
And what happened after you registered that you had been stabbed?
Well, I came in and out of consciousness for a while, but I didn't really know what was going on. The last thing I remember before waking up in the hospital was seeing a woman in red. I think she must have been a paramedic or something. When I woke up in the hospital, the doctors had told me it was a miracle that I was alive.
That's hearsay. The state has not produced any doctors or medical staff from the night in question as witnesses. So any evidence my learned friend seeks to lead from Mr. Snow about what the doctors did tell him is hearsay.
Counsel for the prosecution, do you have a response for that?
Conceded.
Please proceed.
Cool. So, Mr. Snow, how would you summarise the events of March 15th?
Well, Oliver Black tried to stab me in the heart. He tried to kill me over nothing at all. It is disgusting.
Objection, Your Honour. That's an opinion. The witness earlier testified that the witness didn't testify earlier that he remembers being stabbed, just that he remembers feeling a blinding pain in his chest and then falling over.
Counsel for the prosecution.
Your Honour, given the circumstances, it's a reasonable connection to make between Mr. Black picking up a piece of shattered glass and lunging at the Snow. Mr. Snow, immediately after being lunged at and having something thrust at him, registered that there was a gash in his chest from which he was bleeding.
There's been no mention of a piece of glass yet, apart from the glass smash. There's been no mention by the witness that he was stabbed with a piece of glass.
Counsel for the prosecution.
I think that the logical connection was meant to be made. There was subtext there that the glass was shattered, and then Mr. Black lunged at him with, if you just let me review that statement. Lunged off the ground, and then... So it is reasonable to establish that something that Mr. Black had done had caused blinding pain to Mr. Snow's chest and the establishment of a deep gash from which he was bleeding heavily.
So it appears to the court that there's no issue in dispute as to the fact that the witness suffered an injury. Perhaps you can reframe your questions regarding how you draw your conclusions regarding the injury.
Understood, Your Honour. Mr. Snow, how would you summarise the events of March 15th?
Well, in the statement, in paragraph 18, it says I had been stabbed with a broken glass, missing my heart by centimetres.
That's evidence from the doctors. That's hearsay. It's already been objected out and conceded.
Sorry. Could you just direct me to which paragraph of the witness statement that evidence comes from?
Paragraph 18, Your Honour.
18. Thank you.
Apologies, but the court is conferring.
Yeah, sorry. We are conferring via Skype.
That's absolutely fine, guys.
Okay, so we are in agreement that we will exclude that. So, counsel, could you please rephrase the question to the witness?
Thank you, Your Honour. So, Mr. Snow, we've already established that you had come in and out of consciousness after Mr. Black had lunged at you and you had recognised that you were bleeding. So, where did you go after having slipped in and out of consciousness?
You would go to a hospital.
Where did you go?
Oh, I went to the hospital. Is that not the? Sorry, is that what you asked? Where did I go? Yeah, I went to the hospital.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honour.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Mr. Molinas,
Yes, I'd like to cross-examine.
please proceed.
Good evening, Mr. Snow. Now, you're the head security guard at the Wall nightclub, correct?
Yes,
And it's safe to say you take your job quite seriously?
I enjoy working at the Wall.
And as the head security guard, you must be pretty good at your job. Is that right, Mr. Snow?
Oh, I always try and talk people out of a fight.
Now,
Objection.
that's not what I asked.
Objection.
Mr.
On what
Roberts,
grounds?
Your Honour, the defence counsel is trying to get my witness, or is speculating in his question, the expectation that someone must be good at their job in order to be a supervisor is an assumption.
I think it's a reasonable inference that if someone holds a position of authority in a role, that they must be good at that role.
But it doesn't exclude cases like nepotism. It's an assumption.
What is the specific ground of objection that you are putting forward here?
Your Honour, my learned colleague established that, or framed the question, you are the supervisor at the Wall, to the effect of, you are the supervisor at the Wall. That must mean that you are good at your job. Is that right? So I am arguing that it's an assumption that someone has to be good at their job in order to be a supervisor.
I'm happy to rephrase if Your Honour's right.
Yes, please go ahead.
Do you believe you're good at your job, Mr. Snow?
Objection.
Sorry, can you please repeat the question?
Objection.
Mr. Roberts, on what grounds?
Your Honour, the defence counsel is asking for the witness's opinion.
I'm asking for the witness's belief.
Which is an opinion.
I think the witness is in a unique position to be able to answer whether or not they believe they're good at their job or not.
Mr. Roberts, I will let the question slide on the basis that the witness is entitled to express an opinion on his or her own competency. The relevance of the question is yet to be seen, but I'll let this question go.
Mr. Snow, are you good at your job?
I take my job seriously and like to think I am.
Do you enjoy your job as a head security guard?
For the most
Objection.
part, I enjoy.
Mr. Roberts, on what ground?
Your Honour, the enjoyment of the job by the witness is immaterial to the case.
Sorry, is your objection on the grounds that it's not relevant?
Yes, relevance, Your Honour.
I do believe I do believe it's relevant, Your Honours. Part of the job, being a security guard, it requires the use of violence. What the defence is trying to establish is whether or not the witness does in fact lack their job, which requires the use of violence. It speaks to the character of the witness.
What is the connection between the witness's enjoyment of the job and...
Unfortunately, I haven't been able to establish my case theory as my opening comes after, but part of defence's case theory is that Mr. Snow is in fact a violent individual. Now, I think enjoying your job, administering violence, indicates that.
This is a long bow to draw for the jury, but I'll allow you to continue to start the questioning.
Do you enjoy your job as a security guard, Mr. Snow?
For the most part, I enjoy working at the wall.
Your job requires the use of violence from time to time, doesn't it?
When people do look for a fight, I generally talk them out of it by anything else.
But you are happy to use violence at work when you deem it necessary, correct?
Some people we do have come in to cause trouble though, but I generally talk them out of it before anything else.
Mr. Snow, you said in your statement that you're happy to get your hands dirty. Is that right?
Oh, I wasn't asked about it, but it's in the statement.
It is in the statement. So the statement you made to the police, you said you're happy to get your hands dirty, that it's part of the job after all. Is that correct, Mr. Snow?
If it doesn't work when I talk to the person, that means they don't want to talk to me. I'm happy to have to remove them within my power.
So you're happy to use violence when it's required?
I'm happy to... Sorry, let me just look at the statement. So it says, when I generally try and talk them out of it for anything else, but if that doesn't work, I am happy to have my hands on them.
So on the 15th of March, you were working as head security guard at the wall. And on this night, you asked Mr. Black
Yep.
to come inside so you wouldn't be seen arguing in front of other guards or patrons. Is that correct?
Yeah, because he disobeyed my order, so I wanted to talk to him to the side.
This argument was stemming from Mr. Black's decision to refuse entry to a customer. Is that correct?
It was a regular customer. I know to be a good customer, so I was upset that he disobeyed my order to let him in.
That's when you ordered Mr. Black off the door to argue with him inside in private, correct?
Mr. Black was angry at me for not letting someone in, so I asked him to go inside so we can discuss.
Let's listen to the question. You ordered Mr. Black off the door to argue with him in private, correct?
It's not in my statement I ordered him off the door, but we talked inside. I can't assist the court with that question, but what it says is that I asked him inside so we could not be seen arguing in front of other guards in line or people waiting to get in.
Yes. So
Only inside I then asked him.
You directed him to follow you inside, is that correct?
Yes, I asked him to come inside but not come off the door.
You get inside and you ask Mr. Black what his problem is that right?
Yeah, I asked him what the problem was.
But Mr. Black stated that you were in fact his problem. He said, "You're my problem. You're a useless head of security. You'll let just about anyone in." Now, this was in reference to the patron that you ordered him to let in moments prior. Isn't that right? No.
Yeah, the customer that I know. Yeah.
And you asked him a question, and you didn't like his answer very much, did you?
Pardon, can you please repeat it? My thing cut out.
You asked him a question, what's his problem? And you didn't like his answer much, did you?
I was offended by the accusation that I'm not good at my job.
You got offended.
I was offended by the accusation.
And then you got physical with Mr. Black, didn't you?
I put a hand on his shoulder.
You put your hands on Mr. Black, didn't you?
I put one hand on his shoulder.
So you did get physical with him.
I put a hand on his shoulder.
It's a yes or no question. Did you get physical with Mr. Black or not?
I put a hand on his shoulder. I wasn't necessarily physical.
A big part of your job
Hand on
as
his shoulder.
a big part of your job as a security guard involves de-escalating situations. Isn't that right, Mr. Snow?
Sorry, I'm cutting out. Can you please repeat the question?
A big part of your job as a security guard involves de-escalating situations. Isn't that right, Mr. Snow?
Yeah, so as I said, I like to talk people generally first before they're starting a fight, and then,
You didn't ask Miss Black to leave before you went hands-on, did you?
Sorry, can you please repeat? I apologise, my internet's bumming out a little bit.
Instead of asking Mr. Black to leave, you went hands-on, correct?
Well, I asked him what the problem was, and I said that he was out of line with his accusation. I put a hand on his shoulder to start walking him out the club.
Just listen to the question. Before you put your hands on Mr. Black, you didn't tell him you were going to walk him out of the club, did you, Mr. Snow?
Not in the statement.
After you put your hands on Mr. Black, you say he spat in your face and began flailing around. Is that right?
He said, "No, you're out of line, John. I'll never take orders from you." And then he spat in my face and started flailing around.
And the next thing you know, Mr. Black is on the floor, correct?
He must have slipped because everything happened very quickly.
But you don't know exactly how he got onto the floor, do you, Mr. Snow?
No, I don't know what happened. I can't recall.
In your statement, you actually said he must have slipped or something, correct?
Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah. I thought you meant, something else, So he said Oliver must have slipped or something.
You didn't see him slip, though, did you?
Well, he was on the ground. I can't assist the court with that question.
A big part of your job as a security guard is observation. Isn't that right, Mr. Snow?
I can't, it's not in the statement. I can't answer that.
You have to inspect IDs. You have to tell if people are drunk or not when they come into the club. You're scanning the club to see if there's any threats.
Mr. Roberts?
Your Honour, part of this question, it hinges on an assumption, the assumption being that there's a comparability between reading what is on an identification card and keeping a rock-solid 100% account of every movement that happens in an altercation which we're discussing.
Mr. Malone?
I can rephrase the question if the honours would like, but I think it's a pretty reasonable question. The question was, you failed. A big part of your job as a security guard is observation. I haven't mentioned anything else yet.
Yeah, sorry, I understood the question to be asking about the scope of the role as a security guard.
Correct.
Sorry, Your Honour.
Unless I misheard it, I'm not sure what connection.
Sorry, Your Honour, if I may. So my learned colleague put words to the effect of your job is observation, hinging an expectation on the prosecution witness to have observed exactly with a perfect account of Mr. Black slipping. But then he followed it with a likening to the expectation, the role of the job in checking IDs and observing for drunken behaviour. And so that's an assumption to assume that those skills, reading an identification card or looking for 3 signs of intoxication, are at all transferable to something as fast-moving and dynamic as an altercation that you're part of.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. The court is conferring. Okay, Mr. Roberts, we will let the evidence slide on the basis that the counsel for the defendant is asking a question about the witness's competency and observations. We'll let the jury decide and draw their own conclusions as to whether this competency applies to both observing cards and in the context of an altercation.
Mr. Snow, do you observe people's identification?
Yes.
Do you observe whether people are intoxicated or not?
Yes.
Do you observe a crowd to see if a fight breaks out?
Yes.
So it's safe to say observation is a big part of your job as a security guard. Is that not correct?
It's a part of my job.
And you failed to observe exactly how a man arm's length away from you, who your attention is clearly focused on, ended up on the floor.
We did spin my face and start flailing around. So everything happened very quickly.
You failed to observe how a man an arm's length away from you, close enough to spit in your face apparently, who your attention is clearly focused on, you failed to observe how he ended up on the floor. Is that correct?
Yes.
All you can do is guess that he must have slipped. Correct? So Mr. Black's on the floor, and you say he's just spat in your face, correct?
Yes.
And the last time Mr. Black made a comment you deemed offensive, you put your hands on him, didn't you? That's what you've testified to.
I'm just rereading. Yes, I put a hand on him.
But this time he spat in your face, and you just sat there looking at him until he slipped and fell.
Well, he started flying around, and then he was on the ground.
Did you leave the room after he fell, Mr. Snow?
No, because I heard a glass smash, and then he lunged at me.
Did you get on your radio and call for another guard?
Well, it doesn't say I have a radio, so I can't recall.
You just stood there. You're the head security guard at the wall. You're happy to get your hands dirty when the situation requires. Your words, not mine. But you didn't try and get physical control of Mr. Black while he was on the floor?
Well, he was on the ground and then he lunged up at me. So I don't know what time I was supposed to get here.
You didn't try to restrain him after he spat in your face? Is that right?
No, I didn't.
You stood there until he fell over and then lunged up at you, correct?
Yeah.
You stood there until Mr. Black, from a prone position on his back, lunged.
Objection.
Mr. Roberts?
Your Honour, the defence is making assumptions. Nowhere is it stated whether the accused fell prone or on his back.
Mr. Noidis?
Well, I'm putting it to the witness.
Objection sustained. Perhaps you should rephrase your question before leading on evidence about the position in which the accused was in.
Yep. You stood there until Mr. Black, lying on the floor, leaps off the ground with you standing over him. Is that correct?
Well, he was on, I don't know if he was lying. He was on the ground, and then I heard a glass smash, and then he yelled something and lunged off the ground towards me.
He didn't reach down and pick something up after he left off the ground, did he, Mr. Black?
Well, I had a glass smash, and then I was bleeding out of my chest after he lunged at me.
That's not the question I asked. I asked you if you saw him pick something up after he leapt off the ground.
Well, I can't assist the court with what I've given in my statement. Can't
so
help him with that.
If Mr. Black already had the glass in his hand, which, according to your series of events, seems to be the way it's occurred, he must have propelled himself off the ground one-handed then. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, he was on the ground. There was a glass smash, and then he lunged off the ground towards me, stabbing me in the chest with something.
I have no further questions, Your Honour.
Your Honour, may the prosecution witness be excused.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Thank you, Mr. Molinas. Mr. Molinas, you have the floor for your examination in chief.
First, I'll do my
Oh, sorry,
opening.
your opening.
Oh, beg your pardon.
May it please the court. The prosecution must prove today, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Mr. Black acted with the intent to unlawfully kill Mr. Snow. The defence admits that on the state's case, that's simply not possible. If Your Honours take issue with the credibility of Mr. Snow's statement, that alone would provide reasonable doubt, and Your Honours must render a finding of not guilty. You will hear evidence from the defendant that Mr. Snow is in fact a man with a penchant for violence, a man who's happy to get his hands dirty even when it isn't necessary, a man who loses his temper when his authority is challenged, and a man who threatened to snap Mr. Black's neck, pushed him to the ground, and lunged on top of Mr. Black to do what he does best, violence. You will hear a different explanation as to how Mr. Snow ended up with a laceration in his chest from broken glass, one that does provide reasonable doubt in this case. It may sound contrived at first, that Mr. Snow fell onto the glass and wounded himself in the process while he tried to attack Mr. Black, but if you assess the claim in the context of the evidence you're about to hear and the evidence you've already heard, Your Honour will have reasonable doubt. You will hear how Mr. Black, after being threatened, assaulted, and pushed to the floor, instinctively reached out to grab something and held his hands out in front of him to brace himself against Mr. Snow lunging towards him. You'll hear how, as Mr. Snow lunged onto Mr. Black, looking to do him harm while Mr. Black was still on the floor, Mr. Snow impaled himself on the glass in the process, dropped to the floor, and left Mr. Black to flee in fear of being attacked again. The defence admits there's no intent to kill here. There wasn't even intent to harm. It was a desperate, instinctual act of self-preservation, putting his arms out to brace against an attacker while lying on his back. It was Mr. Snow's own actions that night that led to his hospitalisation, but they shouldn't lead to a stint in prison for Mr. Black. Thank you. I'd like to call my witness now.
Please proceed.
Can you please state your name, age, and address to the court?
My name's Oliver Black. I'm 19 years old and I live at 16 Orphan Crescent in Fremantle.
And what do you do with yourself, Mr. Black?
I work as a security guard at the Wall nightclub in Joondalup, and when I'm not working, I study agricultural science at UWA.
Can you tell the court a bit about your time at the Wall?
So I've been working at the Wall for just under 4 months. It's not the most glamorous work, but it took me a long time to find a job, so I was really happy to get it. And I support myself financially, and money was getting to be really tight before I got the offer.
And how did you find working at the Wall when you first started?
In the first week after I started, the watch my father had given me on his deathbed was taken from my locker in the staff room.
So how would you describe that experience?
It was a really bad experience to start with.
Did you do anything about this stolen watch, Mr. Black?
I confronted my boss, John Snow, about it.
And how would you describe your interactions with Mr. Snow after you confronted him?
I confronted him about it and I was absolutely devastated. It was the only thing that I had to remember my father by after my family home was destroyed. And things have been really tense between us ever since.
Okay, so I'm going to bring you forward now to the night of 15th of March. Were you working at the Wall that night?
Yeah, so I was rostered to work at the Wall from 9 p.m. till 2 a.m. The following morning.
And what was your role on the night?
So once I started my shift, John put me outside checking IDs and intoxication. So basically, I had to make sure no one got inside who was already drunk. Pretty standard stuff.
Do you recall what Mr. Snow was doing at this time?
So while I was doing this, John was standing nearby, generally avoiding doing his job properly and mostly just talking to his friends when they'd arrive.
And what sort of presence did Mr. Snow have? How did he make you feel?
John isn't really a big guy. I've seen him handle some fights before and he's honestly scary.
You mentioned you've seen him in fights. Can you recall any specific instance for the court?
One time, a guy ran past him trying to get into the venue. John grabbed him by the back of his neck, pulled him to the ground and punched him right in the face. The guy ended up having to go to hospital, and it was a completely disproportionate response, and I have no idea how he didn't get in trouble for it.
So you're on the door on the night in question. What happened next, Mr. Black?
Someone tried to come in who displayed the signs of being heavily intoxicated. He dropped all of his cards in his wallet trying to get his ID out, and he was swaying all over the place, slurring his speech and reeking of alcohol.
So how did you react to the intoxicated individual?
Well, I politely told him that we weren't going to be allowing entry. It was illegal for someone to be intoxicated in a licensed venue. After saying it a couple of times, he seemed to get the picture and he started to leave the line, but then he saw John and called out to him.
And what did you see John do?
Once John saw him, he came over and he spoke to him for a moment and then started to walk him into the venue. I went to stop him and said, "What are you doing?" He's obviously trashed. I was worried about him getting in since I could lose my license and be out of a job if I was caught inside by police.
So what did John do next?
John replied, "Nah, he's fine. He's a friend of mine. He won't cause any trouble." And he pushed past me, gesturing the man into the venue. I started to argue, but he grabbed me and dragged me inside.
Can you please tell the court what unfolded once you got inside?
Once inside, he got right up close to me and said, "What's your problem, you little shit? How dare you question my authority?" And I replied, "You'll just let anyone in. You don't care about the consequences for other people. You're awful at your job. What if the police came in?"
After you told him your problem, how did John respond to you?
He put his hand out and tightly gripped my shoulder, hurting me a little. He said, "You insolent bitch. It's not the police you should be worried about. You know I could break your neck right now and no one would care." And he moved his hands up towards my neck.
So how did Mr. Snow's threats and physical actions towards you make you feel?
Well, I was terrified. He had this crazy look in his eyes, but I said, "I'm not scared of you. You don't deserve to give orders," and pushed his hand off my shoulder. He responded by pushing me to the ground. I fell hard on the edge of a table and a glass shattered right next to me.
After you've been pushed to the floor, how were you situated?
I was lying on my back.
So could you see Mr. Snow?
Yeah, I could.
And what did you see him do, Mr. Black?
He pulled his fist back and lunged towards me. I thought he was going to kill me, so I closed my eyes, instinctively grabbed out at the first thing I could, and pushed my hand up to try and stop him.
You said you grabbed something. Did you know what you had grabbed?
No, I don't know what I grabbed.
And can you tell the court what happened next?
Well, I don't know exactly what happened, but he seemed to stop. And when I opened my eyes, he was lying on the ground next to me.
What happened after you opened your eyes and you saw him lying there, Mr. Black?
I wasn't going to hang around and let him attack me again, so I ran to my car and drove home. I didn't realise he was injured until the police came to arrest me.
And can you tell the court why you decided to run away at this stage?
Well, I wasn't going to hang around and let him attack me again, so I decided to run to my car and drive home.
And can you tell the court how you're feeling during this whole ordeal? I
was terrified. He had this crazy look in his eyes, and the whole ordeal was terrifying.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Black. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lotus. Mr. Roberts, you may proceed when you're ready.
Yes, Your Honour. Mr. Black, So you've been working at the venue for less time than Mr. Snow, is that correct?
Oh, well, I don't know how long Mr. Snow's been working, but I've been working there for under 4 months.
So you're one of the new guys. Is that right?
Yes.
What sort of duties do you perform there, Mr. Black?
Well, usually I just follow what my statement says. The night when I was out the front checking IDs and intoxication.
And so while you're out there checking IDs and intoxication on the regular, do those duties afford you the time and presence of mind to keep an account of all staff activities for the duration of your shift?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? It dropped out.
So while you're out there checking IDs and intoxication, do those duties afford you the time and presence of mind to keep an account of all the staff activities that are going on around you during your shift?
What's the relevance of this line of questioning?
If I may,
Please.
The line of relevance is that Mr. Black has operated on the assumption for some months that Mr. Snow has stolen his watch. This is relevant to the case because it has generated a context of tension, and it is my intent to establish this as an unreasonable assumption to proceed on.
With all respect to my learned friend, this isn't a case about a stolen watch. It's an attempted murder case. Now, the defendant hasn't filed charges about a stolen watch. It's not really tension in this issue. I don't really see how it's relevant to this particular case. It's not in contention that there was tension. Both witnesses agree with that. So I don't see the point in continuing down this line of questioning.
It's my understanding that it is in contention whether the watch was taken specifically by Mr. Snow.
Yep.
So on those grounds, I would consider it to be an issue in question. It may not be the primary issue in question, but it is an issue to be decided. Well, it's an issue to be put to the witness.
Yeah.
Thank you, Your Honour. So, Mr. Black, do these duties afford you the time and presence of mind to keep an account of all staff activities for the duration of your shift?
No.
And did it take you a long time to find a job?
Well, I was trying to find something that I could support myself financially, so money was getting really tight.
So the money was getting tight.
Yes.
Is it understandable that you would not want to return to a period of financial insecurity?
Well, I support myself financially, and money's tight. So yeah.
So it is understandable that you would not want to return to a period of financial insecurity. Is that right?
Yes.
So you would be reasonably protective when it comes to anything that you perceived as threatening your employment status. Is that right? Or at least you would act to protect it. Is that right?
Sorry, can you repeat that last part?
So you would act to protect your anything, threatening your employment status. Is that right?
Well, I just do my job at the Wall nightclub in Joondalup. I'm trying to support myself financially.
Yes. But you would not want to return to that status of being financially insecure. So
yes.
You would want to protect against things that threatened your return to that status of financial insecurity. Is that right?
Yes.
So within the first 4 months of your employment, you had already had what you'd call a bad experience. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
This was the theft of your dad's watch. Is that right?
That's correct.
Who did you accuse of the theft?
Well, I didn't know who stole it. Sorry, I knew who stole it, and it was John Snow, the head security guard.
Okay. What grounds do you have to hold that belief?
Well, he was one of the only people with a key, and he went mysteriously missing for a while on the night it was taken. Plus, he had told me before how much he liked the watch.
Okay, so he was one of the people that held a key. He was not the only one to hold a key. Is that right?
Yes.
And you confronted Mr. Snow about this, even though you have already established that your duties do not permit you the time to take a careful account of everyone's or all staff's whereabouts on shift. Is that right?
I confronted him about it, yes.
You confronted him and have made one of the premises for your confrontation that he went amiss for a period during shift. Is that right?
No, I never said that. I said I confronted him about it, and he must have stashed it or something.
Can I take you back to your statement and what you said? I'll just go back to statement 4, paragraph 4 of your statement, where you established that he was one of the only ones with the key and went mysteriously missing for a while on the night it was taken.
That's correct?
That's correct. Okay, but your duties do not enable you to take a careful account of everyone's whereabouts while you were on shift. Is that also correct?
That is also correct.
Okay, so fundamentally all you have left is the fact that he complimented your watch. Is that correct?
Well, he was one of the people who had a key, and he commented on how much he liked it, yes.
But he was only one of the people with a key.
That's correct.
And you operate on the presumption that he must have stashed it or something. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Objection, Your Honour. He's asking the defendant to speculate in this instance.
Mr. Roberts?
Your Honour, I'd like to frame the fact that he has speculated against what that does suggest, and I'll do so in my follow-up question if that's acceptable to the court.
And what would your follow-up question be, Mr. Roberts?
My follow-up questions would be, first, what he meant by stashing it, and does the fact that he came to the conclusion that he must have stashed it somewhere, does that then suggest to some degree that he had gone to an effort to disprove the accusation by showing the accused what he had on his person at the time?
If I may, Your Honours, once again, he's asking my witness to speculate.
The court will now confer being of us. The court has decided to sustain the objection on 2 grounds. First of which is that you are calling for speculative evidence, and the second to which is that the speculation does not appear to be an issue in dispute, and that is the charge for the subject of this matter.
Thank you, Your Honour. So, Mr. Black, did you contact police about the stolen watch?
Sorry. No, I didn't.
Did you speak to management?
I confronted my boss, John Snow, about it.
But did you speak to the venue management who supersede him?
No, I didn't.
So if you knew who stole the watch and this was such an issue for you then, why didn't you contact the police?
Well, it was a watch that meant a lot to me, and at the time... Sorry, let me just...
Sorry, so can I just ask you there, if it meant so much to you and you knew who stole it, then why didn't you contact the police or notify management of the theft?
I can't answer that question.
And is there any chance that his comment about your watch was simply a compliment intended to break the ice?
Objection, Your Honour. He's asking my witness to speculate again.
Mr. Roberts?
Conceded, Your Honour.
Please proceed.
Yes, I agree, Mr. Roberts. This line of questioning is bordering on repetitive. So I would encourage you to continue with your time.
Mr. Black, so in this sense, you made that confrontation and you caused that tension, is that right?
Well, I confronted him about the stolen watch, that's true.
Okay. So you have seen Mr. Snow handle himself in fights before, is that right?
Sorry, 1 second. I saw him grab a guy, the back of his neck, pull him to the ground.
So it was a yes or no question. You have seen him handle himself in fights, is that right?
Yes.
And he's not a big guy, but in those fights you've seen him handle himself at your shared workplace, is that right?
Yes, that's true.
And your shared workplace is a bar or nightclub, is that correct?
That's correct.
So your perception of Mr. Snow's fighting ability is entirely supposed on how he handles himself in fights with people who are impaired by the effects of alcohol and drugs. Is that right?
Well, I don't know if the other people are on alcohol or drugs.
So you've gone to the length of describing one of these altercations that you've seen Mr. Snow involved, haven't you?
Yes, that's true.
And you have no idea how he didn't get into trouble for it. Is that right?
That's true.
And you said that the other belligerent had to go to hospital. Is that right?
That's correct.
Do you know the nature of the hospital visit?
No, I do not.
So you don't know that it was at all pertaining to anything inflicted by Mr. Snow. Is that right?
Well, after Mr. Snow grabbed him...
Sorry, can I just clarify? Do you or do you not know whether that hospital visit was pertaining to anything that was inflicted by Mr. Snow?
No, I don't.
Is it possible that may... is it possible that may explain why he didn't get into trouble?
It's possible, yeah.
Okay, so is it equally possible that the reason he didn't get into trouble is because other than...
Once again, he's asking the witness to speculate.
Mr. Roberts?
In this case, Mr. Black has presented evidence that suggests that that Mr. Snow has inflicted this damage, which has caused the third party here to end up in hospital, and he's supposed his kind of perception of Mr. Snow's fighting ability on that. So I think that it's a reasonable question to ask whether it is possible at all whether the hospital visit or indeed whether the proportionality was there for the incident in question.
If I may, Your Honour, my learned friend is asking my witness to speculate on this matter, whereas my witness has first-hand eyewitness testimony as to the violence is witnessed from Mr. Snow. There is a distinct difference between the two.
Mr. Roberts, are you trying to elicit evidence that the injuries inflicted upon this person was not sufficient for him to send to hospital?
Okay, so I'm first inferring that the injuries, there may not necessarily have been injuries that were inflicted by Mr. Snow, and there is no suggestion of such. Secondly, I'm inferring that that anecdote that has been provided by the accused doesn't have very much bearing in terms of that he didn't get into trouble as the accused has established, and therefore it's an issue of proportionality as well, which the defence is trying to misrepresent.
Okay, Mr. Roberts, you're entitled to ask the witness to form an opinion on whether he considers those injuries are sufficient for hospital. However, I will caution that the court is, I suppose, struggling to see the relevance of the proportionality of this particular incident and its relation to the current dispute.
Sorry, Your Honour. So may I clarify there that the issue is that this whole is necessarily hinged on his perception. So basically, the perceived necessity is on the fact that he has seen Mr. Snow handle himself in fights before.
Okay, understood.
So, Mr. Black, is it equally possible that the reason he didn't get into trouble is because other parties, namely police or management, viewed his response as proportionate?
I mean, it's possible, but I don't know. All I know is he ended up going to hospital.
Thank you. So on the 15th of March at 11 p.m, you and Mr. Snow got into a dispute regarding the admission of a patron into a bar, is that right?
I don't know what time it was.
But it did happen on the 15th of March. Are you satisfied to say that?
That's correct.
And the admission of someone who you thought to be intoxicated gave you good cause to be worried about your job, is that correct?
Sorry, that last part cut out.
So the admission of someone who you thought to be intoxicated gave you good cause to be worried about your job, is that correct?
That's correct.
So you were worried about being cast back into financial insecurity with dwindling finances, is that correct?
Well, I was worried about a intoxicated patron entering the venue, which would be a breach of my job.
So in your account, at some point, he gripped your shoulder with one hand and then moved that hand toward your neck. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you've admitted Mr. Snow is not a big guy. Is that true?
That's true.
So given that Mr. Snow is not a big guy, how reasonable is it to expect him to follow through on that action and be able to snap your neck with one hand?
Well, it's based on the fact that he put his hand on my shoulder and put it around my neck.
But what I'm saying is that I'm suggesting that even in your own accounts, Mr. Snow may not have had the ability to follow through on that.
Objection, Your Honour. Once again, he's asking my witness to speculate.
If I may, Your Honour.
There's no way that the witness can know the exact physical strength of Mr. No, he doesn't know what he benches at the gym. He just knows that he's not a particularly large guy.
Your Honour, if I may, so again, this comes back to his perception. So this comes back to the accused's perception if he were to defend himself at all. That is related necessarily to his perception.
I agree, Mr. Roberts. The witness is entitled to express an opinion on whether he perceives to be in danger, whether that perception is grounded as a matter of separate evidence.
So I'll ask you again, Mr. Snow, or Mr. Black rather, given that Mr. Snow is not a big guy, how reasonable is it to expect him to be able to follow through on that action and snap your neck with one hand?
Well, I'd say it's not reasonable.
Thank you. You then said to him that you weren't scared of him and that he didn't deserve to give orders. Is that right?
That's correct.
So you take issue with Mr. Snow's instructions on a basis of deserving, is that right?
Sorry, I just need to check the statement. I doesn't say anything that I've taken issue with his instructions before.
But you did say that he didn't deserve to give orders, is that right?
That was when he entered the nightclub, yes.
Okay, thank you. So you allege that you were pushed. He alleges that you slipped while falling, but at some point you knocked a table. Is that right?
That's correct. Yep.
Can you tell us about the table, or what was on the table?
Well, I don't know what was on the table.
Okay, but a glass was definitely on the table. Is that right?
Well, a glass shattered next to me.
When you knocked the table, so suggests that it came off the table.
Yeah, that's possible.
Okay. And you were aware at this point of the glass shattering right next to you. Is that right?
That's right.
And after you fell, you grabbed something and pushed it at Mr. Snow. Is that right?
That's true.
And at the time that you reached out to grab something, you were aware that there was a shattered glass there. Is that right?
That's true.
So you pushed that something at Mr. Snow, knowing that the something was more than likely a shard of glass. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know. I stick to my statement. I don't know what I had. I closed my eyes.
But you thrust something at Mr. Snow. Is that right?
That's true.
Then instead of appealing to any authority, such as the management or police, you jumped in your car and drove straight home. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you stabbed Mr. Snow as the result of an altercation situated in the context of tension that you caused with previous confrontation with no real basis, with the point of grievance on the night steeped in risking losing your job. Is that right?
Objection, Your Honour. That seems to me a compound question. Two there, I believe.
Conceded, Your Honour. I'd like to carry on.
Please proceed.
So, Mr. Black, this dispute on the night came out of a concern about you doing something that may result in you losing your job. Is that correct?
No, the dispute came about because Mr. Snow entered a patron who I believe was intoxicated.
Of which you were concerned about the risk to your job. Is that right?
Well, I was concerned about it being a breach. Yes, that's true.
Okay. So you never bothered to contact police about this alleged egregious assault at the hands of your supervisor. Is that right?
That's correct.
And then you jumped straight into your car and drove home. Is that right?
That's correct.
Why'd you leave your shift if you were so concerned about your job?
Well, I was terrified of John.
What effect do you think stabbing your boss and then driving off mid-shift is likely to have on your employment, Mr. Black?
Well, I don't know what happened. I closed my eyes.
No further questions, Your Honour.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Council, I'll now allow you 3 minutes to form your closing submissions.
Hmm.
Just so the viewers are clear, there's a 3-minute intermission for the competitors to prepare their final closing statements.
Council, Mr. Roberts, are you ready to proceed with your closing, or would you require more time? Mr. Roberts?
It seems like he's got his microphone muted. If you look in the
Okay.
bottom right
I
corner.
think we'll just give the full 3 minutes. How are we going for time?
It was 3 minutes on my timer.
Oh, okay.
Okay, let me see if I can raise him. I'm just going to message him and see if he's available. 1 second, please. Okay, Michael, feel free to take more time until we can raise Sean. I'm very sorry.
I'm ready. It's fine.
All right. I'm very sorry about this, everyone. I'm just trying to raise Sean.
Mr. Roberts, are you ready to make your closing submissions?
Does look like his camera's frozen.
It does. Oh dear. Cool. Oh, no. Sean, can you hear us?
Can anyone hear me?
Yep, there you are.
Yeah, we can hear.
Can't hear any of you.
You can't hear us? I'll send him a Facebook message. Happened to me just before.
So you guys can all hear me.
Yep.
Is that right? Just wait.
Yep.
Actually, browser issues happened up.
So are you guys all good if I pull out of this and then restart it, or because I can't hear a word of you?
Yeah. Disconnect and reconnect.
So are you guys all good if I pull out of this and then restart it, or because I can't hear a word of you? I still can't hear any of you.
Disconnect and reconnect.
So are you guys all good if I pull out of this and then restart it? Sorry about that. Can you all hear me?